So let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so much for joining us this Sunday afternoon for Out of the Nest, a discussion about easing your college-bound teen into adulthood. We are so excited to be doing this webinar. I think I'm maybe more excited than normal just because we're like living here in isolation. So this is so fun to have this virtual communication. And I'm joined today with two amazing women here in Chicago. They were so gracious to put this webinar together, especially during this crazy time. They were so eager to offer this to all of you. So Melissa Richardson and Teresa Hayes are founding partners of Critical Thinking Partners, LLC, a high-touch consulting service founded in 2014. The focus of the firm is to provide clients with specialized skills related to critical thinking, problem solving, and listening, verbal and nonverbal skills. Melissa's work experience prior to starting Critical Thinking Partners, LLC includes teaching for 7 years as an adjunct faculty member at DeVry University, teaching critical thinking and problem solving and career readiness courses. Before coming to DeVry, Melissa was a career advisor at DePaul University, working with MBA students and alumni. Melissa received her BA from Western Michigan University in 1999 and her MED with a focus on counseling from DePaul. Teresa's work experience prior to starting Critical Thinking Partners LLC includes teaching for 20 years as a full-time faculty member at DeVry University, teaching critical thinking and problem solving, public speaking, and interpersonal communication. Teresa also spent several years as a department chair, coordinating and facilitating department meetings, hiring, mentoring, and scheduling faculty, and providing background student and faculty support, as well as conflict management. Before coming to DeVry, Teresa was an adjunct professor of a variety of English, communication, and life skill courses at Daly College and Wright College, City Colleges of Chicago. Teresa received her BA in communication from DePaul and an MA in communication also from DePaul. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Again, just as a housekeeping item, please text me in the chat box if you have any questions or comments as we go. I will be here moderating those questions and we'll be sure to leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A, but I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Melissa and Teresa.
Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, you're good to go.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Teresa, I can't hear Teresa though, can you?
Go ahead and make sure. There we go.
Teresa?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, good. Hi, I'm Melissa. That's Teresa. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Alex, thank you for having us. And that was such a nice introduction. We're excited to be doing this and excited to be working with all of you dialing in on this Sunday during a pandemic, during these unprecedented times. Our understanding is that these are mostly families that are parents that are on the call this afternoon to talk about that have seniors that are in high school that are moving on to the next stage. That's probably pretty accurate. If it's not, please feel free to throw something in the chat and we can accommodate. But we're excited about engaging with you, and this is a small enough group that we can, we can make it conversational. So as we're talking about things, if you have points that you'd like to bring up or things that you'd like to discuss or dig down deeper in, just let us know. We're more than happy to make it conversational based. We operate like that in many different kinds of seminars. So feel free to jump in. So we'll get started. So these are unprecedented times, as you all know. There are so many things that we don't know, and so much is up in the air. And you will have children that are transitioning into the next phase, and that has got to be a little daunting in this uncertain time. So today we hope to touch on some best practices around communicating with your young adults, as your family shifts from what they've been doing for quite some time to something new. And that something new could be going off to college, staying home and learning remotely, or something else altogether. I think there are so many unknowns that who knows what kids are going to end up doing next year for college, or what that's going to look like. You can't the good news is you can't over communicate with your child right now. Everybody's looking to be able to talk about what's going on and try to share their thoughts and figure out what's going on. So communication is essential in this time to weathering the storm and coming out successful on the other side. So we're going to dig into a lot of communication, some anecdotal information from some people who have children that are older in college or out of college, and talk about some strategies and some strategies for setting boundaries and strategies for managing time and stress management and financial management. So we're hoping to touch on all of those things this afternoon. I'm going to throw it over to Teresa now, and she's going to give us a little bit of anecdotal information from people who have maybe gone through some of this stuff before.
Thanks, Melissa. How's my volume? Everybody can hear me? Yep, okay.
Yep.
You're good.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to the webinar. So first of all, I just want to check in with everybody and see how you guys are doing in these crazy quarantine times. So maybe everybody can just throw in the chat how you're feeling today, because every day is different, on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is I'm losing my nut, and that's why I'm here, because I can't look at people in my house anymore. And 10 is, you know what, we're doing just fine. See what we got.
You can unmute yourself to share, or you can message
Patty's
me in
a
the chat.
5.
I'm seeing here we've got someone put 5, 10, 7 to 8, but it varies day to day. Or 5 out of 10 was the first one. 7 to 8, but it varies on the day. 5, good to see the sun, someone else said. I agree with that.
Yes, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Someone else
8.
said 8. That's good.
Nice. And a good question.
Okay, and then again, you know, every day is different for teenagers in general. The hours change, right, in quarantine time. So how is everybody's 17/18-year-old doing today? Scale of 1 to 10.
If they're awake.
10.
Nice.
Wow. Remember, 10 is the good one.
Right, just so we're clear on the scale, exactly.
4.5, 6-ish, wild
He's
swing.
all good, I'm not.
He's all good, I'm not. 2, 1 is 9, and the other 1. Oh my God.
Oh,
Me too.
wow.
Eric, you and me both.
Eric, are they twins? Oh.
Yes. Oh my God.
Ooh,
Wow.
Okay.
Cool.
Same
All
gender,
right,
different
well-
gender. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
So my kids are 16. Yeah, they're different. They flip each day.
Ugh.
16/17 and 14 going on 15. So I'm in I'm a year behind you guys as far as doing the college research. So Alex, I'm thinking I should have my junior hop on your next call. So I just did some anecdotal research with I'm the youngest of 8 kids. So I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and there's a very broad spectrum of what my siblings taught their kids as far as getting ready to launch, you know. And again, Melissa and Alex and I have been talking about how it's kind of hard to frame this presentation because, you know, there's so much uncertain. We don't know if your kids are going to launch in the fall, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. So maybe they'll launch, and if not, I think the information that we shared today, we suggest that you go ahead and take these skills and best practices and get started with your kids, even if they are going to stay at home, because a lot of these practices and habits can start today if you haven't already. So we're going to touch on a couple different things later as well. We're going to touch on stress management, time management, remote learning. We have some specifics around learning remotely, but I just want to share what some interesting pieces that I got from two of my one brother and one brother-in-law, and they happen to be CPAs, and they both have several children. So I thought they had a lot of good information to share, and just from and I don't know if some of you guys already have kids that are launched, so this might be familiar to you, but from a big picture perspective, all their kids are in their 20s now. They started pretty young-ish, like K through 8 with, I think we all know this, chores are a really good practice, giving money for chores, not for emptying the dishwasher, but maybe for raking leaves for 2 hours, that type of stuff. But they were both really good about keeping the end in mind, right? So I teach critical thinking, as does Melissa, and one of the things that we teach is Stephen Covey's habits, and one of the 7 habits is to keep the end in mind. So when you're on your deathbed, or you're sitting around your dining room table, what do you want people to be saying about you when you're 90? And so they use that approach. My one brother-in-law is a South Sider in South Side of Chicago, so he does not mince words. So if you don't like swearing, maybe go like this for a minute. But I thought one of his quotes was pretty funny. He said, basically you don't want to raise a bunch of assholes. Quote. So they try to coach their kids not only about financials, but about just trying to, live their lives with empathy, especially because they're going out of the nest. So they're not going to have us saying, hey, that wasn't very nice, or wow, can you say excuse me when you walk right into me? These types of things, we're not going to be there, right? So we need to start calling our kids on that stuff now, and probably especially the summer before they might be going off to college. And then just a couple of financial tips that they shared, having a credit card versus a debit card, and they both suggested not having your college freshmen have a credit card, that a credit card, as long as they pay off their balance at the end of the month, can be a very good discipline for keeping track of your money. One of my brother-in-law met with his kids monthly over the phone while they were in college, especially the first year of college, and he would go over their bank financials with them, and he would look at how much they Venmo'd their friends. He would look at how much they went to Starbucks and that type of thing. And then he would have a areas for opportunity column, otherwise known as weaknesses, and then what they did well. And then the next month, they would review the goals. They would set goals, and then next month, review the goals for the areas for opportunity, and then hopefully they're carrying on with what they did well. They also felt very strongly, both of them, about having kids work while they're in college. And one of my brothers is pretty well off, and his kids didn't have to worry about money, but a lot of their friends were not working, so they got a lot of blowback from their kids because they had to get a job the second they went into college, whether it be at the bookstore or Target or whatever. But they had various jobs, and then of course, especially in the summertime, we could really get our kids working. But he had the anecdotal evidence that out of 3 kids, whenever they weren't working, their grades would drop. So those skills that they were earning, like time management and discipline, being accountable, right? Those are really important skills that our kids can gain when they are on the job. And so when they were slacking off, or when they were had some time where they did not have employment, then he noticed that their grades will drop. So I'm going to stop there. Again, we do have some more suggestions for more specifics on time management in college, but I'm going to kick it back to Melissa.
Thanks. I think it's so interesting to hear what has been successful for people as their kids have moved on. I've got a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I'm kind of straddling a whole bunch of different ages, but the college piece is coming down the pipe pretty quickly. So as I touched on earlier, the communication piece is key. So as you and your children or child are talking about next steps and graduating from high school and moving on to the next step. Goals are important as a family to discuss as a family. So, you know, everybody has their own idea about what they want this next stage to look like, your children, and then you, and sometimes that goal is not a mirror image. So you can best accomplish, you know, figure that out by communicating, right? And I don't know, you know, I think that kids sometimes they don't necessarily know what their goals are. I'm guessing, you know, these kids have been working with Alex, so they probably have a pretty clear idea of what their goals look like or looked like prior to pandemic. So it's just a matter of kind of transitioning and accommodating as we learn more about this life that we're in right now. So keep in mind, so as a family, so if you're communicating about your goals as a family, you're learning what their goals are, they're better understanding what your goals are. You can then come together and set some family goals and communicate around that, and know that those are going to shift, right? The goals are going to shift as your child moves into this next stage in life. And you know, Teresa and I, when we teach critical thinking, we talk about different models, communication models, and all of them include a portion of the model, which is conflict. And so that's, I just want to bring that up because conflict is inevitable, and it's actually really healthy for relationships and groups as they are developing. So as you know, if you think about, you know, you've been operating as a group with your family since your children were born, and you know, there are stages where things are kind of calm, and then there are stages where things get a little bit messy, and that conflict is just something that part of the family dynamic. I think, you know, you think about bringing home a new baby, and it throws everybody off, and it's the conflict comes into the equation, and then you figure it out and you communicate through it, and then you move on and you get back to smoother waters, and that's all very normal. So this is just another new phase that your family's going through, and you should, you know, be ready to there will be some challenges and some conflict, and communication is the most important piece to work through it. So try not to shy away from that communication. Or try to shy away from the conflict, kind of dig into the conflict and help your children to understand that conflict is normal and healthy. That will help them in their relationships with you, as well as their relationships outside of their family. And when you do shy away from conflict, that tends to build resentment. So you don't want to do that. So this is actually a really good opportunity to be working with your kids and setting goals, you know, helping them to understand what your goals are for them in college, you know, talking to them about how much, you know, what the financing is going to look like, how much you're going to be putting in, what they're on the hook for, and kind of just figuring out what the goals are. Are you paying for college for 4 years? Are you paying for college, you know, they should take a victory lap and pay for college for 5 years. So just kind of being very clear about what your goals are, what you're planning to do as a family, as the parents, and then what their goals are too, so that you come together with some new family goals. I think that's all I had to say about that. Teresa, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Both of my kids are in CPS in high school, so I've had a lot of opportunity as a teacher myself to do a lot of coaching. I mean, how often are we all in the same house together, right? So when e-learning started last week on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, it was really surprising to me how different teachers had different modalities going on. So some teachers would have a full-on class where they were asking the kids to pop open their cameras and have a discussion. And then other teachers were taking attendance and handing out an assignment. And then, you know, nice to see you guys. So you have your homework, your deadline is whatever, you know. So, you know, to Eric's point, two kids very different. One would, if they got the, you know, the sayonara, see you Wednesday or what have you, she would stay focused and complete the assignment, use that time wisely. And then the other one, you know, all bets are off. So I started to suggest that, use that time, whatever time you are given. If your class goes from 9 until 10, then stay there from 9 until 10 and do English. And then from 10 to 11, stay there from 10 to 11, even if the teacher pops off, and do your math. I did hear one teacher who was, she's been around the block a few times, so I could tell she was really on it. And she would give the kids, let's do problems 5, 6, and 7. I'll give you 15 minutes. So that way the kids can't go and start watching TV. They actually had to do the problems. So I think what we're doing now is great practice for your kids that are going to be launching in the fall, because I think time management is so key, and the better habits that we have now are going to translate to college. So Melissa and I teach college, so I teach a lot of time management, but my learners are adult learners. So their biggest thing about time is that generally they don't have any time. So I get that, we all get that. But some of the basic skills that I think we can pass along to our prospective college students is to, really keep a journal, or at least keep very good track of when they're taking breaks. So again, harkening back to Stephen Covey and the 7 habits, one of his habits is to sharpen the saw. So we use that metaphor all the time around here. So the idea is, if you're a logger and you're cutting down trees and your blade is getting dull, then do you want to keep using that dull blade, or is it better to go off, sharpen your saw, and then come back and you can cut down some more trees? So that's a regular part of our vocabulary now. When I see one of my kids on Netflix and it's, Tuesday at 2 o'clock or something, I'm like, are you sharpening your saw? And yeah, I'm sharpening my saw. And an hour later, okay, it's time to cut down some trees. How about that? Those trees are waiting now that your saw is sharpened. So in one way, it seems like you guys might be in a really unique opportunity, because pre-pandemic times, you're going to have maybe that summer before your kids go off, and there they go, and they hope for the best, but you have all this time now that you guys are together. And so again, I think the more that we can just keep pointing out the good habits that our kids are doing and the areas for opportunity, and then just, as as parents, we need to just say it over and over again, but stuff that we tend to remember. And then I just wanted to touch a little bit on stress management. Obviously super stressful times for our teenagers. So one of my daughters is the friend in her friend group where she takes on everybody's stress. So she's the good listener. She's the huge, empathic. But that was really starting to weigh on her physically and emotionally. So we just had to set some guidelines. So tell your friends that, after 7 o'clock at night, you can't hear anything dark or depressing. Like, they can still text you something, or you could watch a funny show together, but none of this maudlin, everybody's going to come to her and talk about how bad their life sucks and how they can't stand their families. I mean, it was really just too hard for her. So I think having, to Melissa's point, over communicating with our kids right now about these things that we think could be problems in the future. So, and then lastly, I would just say that, this is a really unique opportunity for us to really help our teenagers with problem-solving skills. So, Melissa and I were doing some research and seminars around Adulting 101 when kids, I think it's Berkeley maybe, or one of the elite colleges out west was having a seminar. Graduate students were giving a class called Adulting 101, and it was like how to make a grilled cheese, right? Because the kids are so busy getting prepared for college that they just miss out on the basics that they need to know. So again, ample opportunity right now for us, for you guys especially, to be teaching your kids how to make pasta and the basics, how to make some oatmeal, keep it cheap, right? And then, if they're coming to us, I think for to help them with their problems, maybe help them, right? But then add in, so when you're, if someone's looking for the ketchup right now, I'm not going to go help them. Find the ketchup. It's in there. You know, find your math book. I was not reading your math book last night at 9 o'clock. You had your math book last. So you go find it, right? These things, so that when they're in college, they're not, you know, they have a problem and then they're not like, shoot, you know, I'm going to go call my mom, you know, that type of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to kick it back to Melissa.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's so true. And that the whole problem solving piece goes into I'd like to talk about next, which is about boundary setting boundaries with our kids, which is really interesting in, you know, today, you know, in this last 5 weeks, but it's important, especially as kids are flying the coop. Do people still say that? I don't know if people still say that, but I just said it. I may have aged myself, but so boundary setting, again, all of this goes back to communication, but we have these kids and they come home from the hospital, we bring them home and they can't do anything and we do everything for them. And then they continue growing and they become teenagers and then they don't necessarily need us. I mean, they think they don't need us, but we kind of adjust and modify, and we set some new boundaries together with our kids, and then we adjust, and then now, you know, now's the time to adjust again because they're moving into adulthood, and that's going to take on many different forms, and there are highs and lows, but the goal is for the children to go off on their own and be self-sufficient, right? As the situations shift, creating and setting healthy boundaries, it becomes more and more important. So the relationship, the thing that to remember about setting boundaries in relationships is that it needs to be equitable, right? So if you're feeling like you don't have anything left, your cup is empty, there's nothing, you're not able to pour anything into anybody else's cup. So you need to make sure that you are getting your needs met, as well as maybe your children are getting their needs met. The worst thing you can do is ignore it and hope for the best. That's not proven to be helpful. So one of the things to talk about as your child graduates and moves on was how involved the parent, how the student wants the parent to be in their next phase of education, in their next phase of life. So if they're going to school nearby home, how often are you all planning to see each other? How often do they want you to drop in unannounced? Do you want them to drop in unannounced? Do you want to do they expect you to contact their professors and their career advisors on their behalf, or is that something that you want to do that might be stepping on the students' toes? Those are things to talk about. When Teresa and Alex and I were speaking earlier this week, we were sharing some stories, and I have a neighbor whose child just went off to school, and it was a nearby school, and she started coming home. At first it was, every other weekend, and then it turned into every weekend, and then it turned into every day, and she was just kind of commuting at home, and the parents kind of ignored it for some time, and then it got to be, they would come home from the grocery store in the morning, and the 18-year-old sitting on the couch, home, and so then it became, it was a more contentious situation because they hadn't talked about it as it was kind of manifesting over the course of the semesters. So it's important to set those boundaries and talk about how often you want your kids to be how often your kids want you to be physically involved in their school, mentally, emotionally involved in this next stage of their life. Parents really want to see their kids, right? So I feel like if they're going away to school, just looking at a calendar and figuring out when, getting some dates on the books that you're gonna come out and see them, or they're gonna come home. But just having those things on the calendar makes everybody rest a little bit more easily. So that's an easy one to kind of an easy boundary to set, and it helps to ease a little anxiety. And then be honest. Make sure that tell your kids what you need out of this relationship. Make sure that they're telling you what they need out of the relationship. Be a good listener and try to understand that they're going through something that's very different, and this is a big opportunity for them to grow up, and they sometimes they just need somebody to listen to what they're going through, not necessarily solve their problems, but listen to what they're going through. sometimes parents are at different stages when their kids are going away to school. So sometimes they're psyched that their kid, they're sending their kids off. And they're really excited to see what the next phase in life brings. Some feel a little bit clingy and they're sad, and it's a very emotional time. So try to find ways before they go off to school to spend time together, quality time together, talking and connecting and practicing your listening and your empathy, your empathetic skills, and just being, work on that relationship, work on those communication skills, so that when they do go off, you're able to continue on with that strong foundation of communication skills to make the best of this next phase in their life. So that's what I have to say about boundary setting. I think at this point, we'd love to open it up to you all and talk about some questions, answer some questions. There's Alex, she's coming back.
I actually just got my nails done, so.
Oh yeah, you went out?
Great. Yeah, the only place in town. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Teresa and Melissa. Yeah, so again, you're welcome to post your questions in the chat. I can moderate those. You're also welcome to just shout out. Hopefully you don't all do it at once. So you're welcome to do that as well. We also have a few questions that, so I have a few questions, I should say. So maybe I'll start with those while we're waiting for others to think of those. What I'm seeing a lot right now is that teens are kind of getting past this is a great vacation from school, and they're starting to really kind of cave in on themselves, right? And just want to kind of remove from this unpleasant reality that we're all facing. So how, when Melissa, you really emphasized just the importance of early and frequent communication and not letting stuff fester and not leaving things until they come to fruition. How would you recommend approaching a conversation with a teen who is really beginning to kind of just remove themselves from any opportunity for communication? And I'm curious just to hear how you would address the same question with any age group, with any demographic. But I think especially right now, I'm seeing this happen a lot with my teens.
Yeah, I think I'll start and then Teresa, you can hop in. But I think that the one of the things that seems to be happening right now is everybody's in this weird routine in the same four walls, and not necessarily thinking, you're just kind of going through the motions, not necessarily thinking about it. So I think the change of environment can be key, especially as the sun comes out and it's warming up, just going for a walk with that person and trying to connect and get out of the rut that you're in on a day-to-day basis, and open up those lines of communications. It's not like you're not gonna take them out for a coffee or an ice cream, but I think just getting outside and going for a walk, or getting in the car and going for a drive can help. I always feel like I say I always have my best ideas as I'm pulling out of my garage, because you're just getting out of the space, which sometimes can feel a little bit stagnant. So I think the first step would be definitely getting into a new space and allowing that child to think about things from a different perspective, and then sharing some of the things that you've noticed that he or she is going through, and then give them some space to be able to talk about where they are in their heads. That's probably where I would start. Teresa, do you have anything to add to that?
So same, I think all of us as parents are used to the idea that we have some of our best conversations in the car. So I actually heard, had a parking lot moment. I heard these two experts talking about how to talk about sex with your preteens. And so I was listening to that, and one of the guys made a comment, and the facilitator laughed, but I think he was dead serious, because I was like, yeah, me too. But what he was saying was, sometimes the most awkward conversations are better had if there is no eye contact. Right. Yeah. So, and I learned that a long time ago with one of mine. And so I'm a big fan of car conversations. In fact, after this seminar, we're going to take a ride downtown, and I'll probably find out all sorts of things.
That's great. Someone else asked, do you have any specific examples of what kinds of goals we could be setting or discussing with our kids right now?
One of the things that I wanted to share was to get ready for remote learning. So if your colleges that your kids are going off to don't open up face-to-face classes in the fall, I spend a lot of time, I teach public speaking online. I've been teaching many years for how to give a speech online, which people thought that's kind of an oxymoron. How do you give a speech online? But you know, now it's paying off, right? Because we're all doing this FaceTiming stuff. But if my older daughter was going off to college in the fall, but she wasn't going anywhere, she was staying here, I would make sure that when it came time for her class, that there were a couple, or I would make sure that she makes sure that she's ready, right? So I've always coached that if you're going into a remote learning environment, you should pretend like you're going into a physical classroom. So, and same for a meeting, even though quarantine times it's kind of weird, like people don't mind that pets are around and microwaves are going off and things like that. But in non-quarantine times, if your kid has a regular online class, they should have the mindset and the physical set, if they can, of being in a professional environment. They should have their homework done. They should have their questions ready to ask. They should stay in class for the whole 3 hours, even if the teacher doesn't. If the professor says, 2.5 hours into it, all right, guys, well, it was great to see everybody. We're going to finish a little early. Then stay in that class until 9 o'clock in your head, whether it be take notes on the lecture or plan out your week's work for that specific class. But, instead of having your class on your lap with your TV in the background or your pizza on your lap, students should be acting as if they are in a physical classroom for as much as we can in this environment. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my thing about one goal is to teach your kids how to prepare for the remote learning environment, which is probably pretty likely for a lot of us. Did you want to add anything to that, Melissa or Alex?
I think the other thing about goals is one of the things I was thinking about was just the financials. So setting up goals and expectations for what, it's an interesting environment now, right? Kids with summer jobs and things like that. So I think it's important to talk to your kids about what the finances are looking like and be honest with them about a budget and some of the issues, some of the things that you're concerned about and some of the things that you probably want them to be thinking about in this strange environment. And as you're going, I feel like that's a huge thing, right? Is graduating from high school and moving on to college, and that finance piece is something new that you may or may not have managed on your own for some time or ever. So I think talking about it when you have your children, when you have their attention is probably a good thing to kind of help them set some goals for themselves and let them understand what your goals are for them. I think that was one of the things I was thinking of when speaking to the goals piece.
And we did in my house, we set up an allowance that the kids would get at the start of the month. And then they have to budget out, if they're going to spend their whole allowance after the second week, then they don't have any money for that last 2 weeks. And so they quickly learned that it's nice to be generous, but if you're going to go to Starbucks and nobody else has money but you, then your $30 is going to be gone probably after 2 or 3 visits. And then my older daughter, they would go out, they're juniors, and they're at Whitney Young, they're downtown Chicago. So they learned really quickly where you can go to get cheap stuff, like Jimmy John's. You can get a sub without anything on it, which is just the bread for 50 cents. And my daughter loves bread, so it's like they go out, they get bread and water, you can go. And I'm like, why are you guys hanging out at Starbucks? Like Target has, or Dunkin' Donuts has cheaper stuff, and you don't care about the type of coffee or hot chocolate you're drinking. It's about being together. So you got to start picking the cheaper places and stop paying for all your friends too.
Yeah, and I think it's also difficult for a young person to even conceptualize how much money it takes to get through a month or a semester of incidentals, or as Melissa and I call it, walking around money. That's even a hard thing to sort of understand. And so I feel like this could maybe be good practice right now and through the summer, practicing with this budgeting, so they get a sense of how much things cost and how far their allowance actually goes. Most universities, if you look at either their website or if you look at your award letter that your child received, they usually will put in there a budget or an estimate of how much living expenses cost. So incidentals like travel and meals outside of the meal plan at the university, and other incidentals. And often that number is sort of an average, for that average student, not necessarily the low spender or the high spender. So that's a good place to start, I feel like, just to get a sense of what is reasonable. And then you as a family maybe could discuss how much is on them and how much is you're willing to kick in. Yeah, that's great.
I think too, we should take advantage of the fact that these kids have been in the house for so long, so that when they can finally get out, well, don't go to Target, go to the park. Like you haven't had a lot of fresh air. So let's make some sandwiches and you guys go have a picnic in the park, play on the equipment now that you can, really
Right.
soak this quarantine for as much as we can.
Yeah.
I love that. We've got another question here. How about some examples of good goals for the summer, especially if our kids can't have their regular summer jobs? Something other than a typical goal, which may be getting ready, organized, packing to go away, considering our students can go to campus in the fall, or hoping our students can go to campus in the fall. Any thoughts there?
It's funny. We've been talking about the daunting. It feels like summer break is already starting to an extent, right? We're doing the online learning, but then my oldest son is done with school at the end of May, and he's if there's no sports to train for and school is out, he's like, it's going to be the longest summer ever. What am I going to do? So we've been talking about goals and things you can do especially if you're not training for fall sports, and nobody's working. so goals. Yeah. So I think that setting goals for exercise has seemed to help so many people in this situation. So setting goals for yourself for exercise, like if you want to be able to run a 5K, or setting some physical goals, maybe meditation, right? I think there are always, not always, but there are often some things that you have thought about trying and that you've never really gotten around to. So setting some of those, thinking about those kinds of things, those are things that you could accomplish over a 2 or 3 month period. I also think that there are opportunities in communities that you can get involved with. I know the food pantries are very overwhelmed right now. I know that one of the local pantries in our neighborhood just opened up a secondary place they took over Wrigley Field because it's large enough to accommodate them. So I think there are opportunities for kids to be able to volunteer and do some give back stuff that might be satisfying and helpful as they're during a long unfocused summer. Does anybody else have any ideas?
I would say too, also just starting to have a good schedule. So having a goal of not sleeping until 11 or 12, but actually, getting 10 hours of sleep a night or whatever, but getting in the habit over the summer of having a good schedule. And then I haven't seen what a college freshman schedule looks like lately, but if you had a schedule, if they knew what they were going to be doing, if they were in college, then you could start mimicking that schedule, like start in August and say, well, you were going to have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 12 to 2 or whatever. So maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, use that time to read or start doing something productive so that they can start getting on a good, healthy schedule, and definitely exercise for sure.
I just put a couple of resources in the chat box. Volunteermatch.org is an online database of service opportunities. You can typically search for volunteer opportunities by your location, but right now they have a whole section devoted to virtual volunteer opportunities. And then many of you know about Coursera.org, where you can access free online classes offered by universities around the world. I know Masterclass was offering some discounts. You could take a class on scientific thinking with Neil deGrasse Tyson, like why not? So those are some good resources as well. Thank you, that was great.
Thank you.
We had another question. I think we talked about the financial piece. I think we talked about making remote learning more productive. Is there anything you wanted to add to making remote learning at home more productive and time management skills around learning at home in case this does go on into the foreseeable future? Anything else to add?
I would say just keep your own bar high. So either the spectrum of teaching that's going on right now is so vast with how much facilitation is actually happening in the remote learning environment. And so we should be encouraging our kids to put yourself to the highest level. So, if you have a 91 average and it doesn't matter what grades you get, because it's not going to drop your grade, well, do it anyway. It can't hurt. Right. And you shouldn't be lowering your standards. You should be the one that's really upping the game for yourself, for your intrinsic reward, your own, personal reward.
Yes, definitely.
It looks like there's another question about tips, or do you have any tips around making smart decisions? It looks like about, who your child hangs out with once they get to college, finding those people who have your best interest, and those people who will really help your child succeed. Tips on having those conversations and helping our kids make smart decisions about who they hang out with and who they choose as their peer group.
Ooh, that's a good one.
A great one.
Yeah, I think, growing up, my parents always said, always encouraged me to surround myself with people who, had stronger work, had a stronger work ethic and were smarter, got better grades. Like, surround yourself with people who are better than you, because that's going to make you work harder. And it sounds crass to say that, I think, as I'm saying it out loud, but there is something to be said about that. Just that kind of surrounding yourself with people who have a strong work ethic, and who have goals and desires and want to talk about interesting things, right? If you're so many of these kids are just plugged into their phones and looking at their phones and surfing social media. I think one of the things that I like to talk about with my kids all the time is just engage with people who actually want to look you in the eye and talk to you and hear what you're thinking and brainstorm ideas, and just make sure that spend your time is valuable, and make sure you're spending your time with people who you're getting something from, and vice versa.
One of my students recently, he grew up on the streets of Chicago and he had a really rough life. And he taught me, in January session, I had him, and his phrase was, I learned pretty quickly that if I was the smartest person in my circle, it was time to change my circle. Mm-hmm. So I like that. And then also, I have taught high school in the past, and what I do is with my seniors, which you guys have, when they walk in the door, I would stand at the door, and if they walk past me without saying hello, I would turn around, make them turn around and walk out again. So when you walk in, look at the adults in the room, say hello, say good morning, how are you, acknowledge me, I'm a human being. So I think that I would suggest to my kids when they go off to college, when they walk in the classroom, say good morning to their professor. You want to be the kid in the class that the faculty member is going to look to for, respond to my question. Teresa, what do you think? And then that's going to give your student really good experience in answering questions. And then, as you guys know, my junior is finding out right now that for the letters of recommendation, you need to have those connections with your teachers. So in college, that's going to be really key for you to have a good reputation with the faculty there and have some people you can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that quote about, I should write that in the chat box. What was it one more time, Teresa? If I'm the smartest person in my circle, smartest person in my group, I need a new group or something like that?
Yeah, if I'm the smartest person in my circle, it's time to find a new circle.
Love that. Yeah, any advice on balancing fun activities with serious schoolwork, study exams, etc.? That's another question from Thor.
So I'm a big fan of chunking, you know, and planning out the week's work. So it's hard in the beginning, in the first week of class. They don't know how long it's going to take to read particular chapters for particular texts. And, you know, lectures take time. So they should get into the habit of creating a weekly work schedule. And then, you know, if you have chunked out 2 hours of time to study math, but then after an hour you're not concentrating, then it's time to take a break. So, but I always warn, you know, time your breaks, keep a log of your breaks, be careful of the social media breaks, right? 10 minutes on Instagram can turn into 40 minutes just like that. But I think, you know, colleges will give them probably an actual physical agenda, and then they should have, you know, Monday, what are they going to do on Monday? Tuesday, what are they going to do? And then put in breaks in there. As parents, most of us do that anyway, right? We've had times where you have to write shower.
Right.
Put gas in the car, you're going to run out of gas, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think also setting timers has been super helpful at my house during this pandemic, just so that you, when you are taking a break, when the timer goes off, you're like, oh, okay, now I'm gonna dig back in. Or even just, I hear my kids setting timers, you know, so that they wake up, their alarm goes off in the morning and they set a timer so that they know how long they can shower before they have to get on the line to get on the class. It's just so, there's timers going off all over the place, but it seems to be helping them. So
yeah.
that,
Timers are key.
yeah.
Wonderful. That's, yes, we've also been using timers. Yeah, the alarms that everybody can hear.
Yes.
Any other questions from everybody as we wrap up? I just want to go ahead and put those final questions in the chat box. I want to make sure all of you also know next Sunday, we're doing another webinar also for seniors and their parents. This one, I encourage you to bring your seniors with you to attend. At 2 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock Pacific, with a good friend of mine, Katie Oliveira, who's the founder of Collegehood Advice podcast. She's down in Austin, Texas, and she gives expert insights, strategies, and stories to help students embrace who they are, their unique gifts, and how to apply these as they're getting started at university. She guided thousands of college students through their college experience in her role as a professional academic advisor and a college success coach at St. Edward's University in Texas, as well as the University of Houston system. So I hope you'll join me for that next Sunday. Let's see, do we have any other questions from the group? Anything else? Any closing remarks from Teresa and Melissa?
Stay well, good luck, this too shall pass, and enjoy the time with our kids.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us today. This was fun.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all who showed up today for the webinar. And again, thank you, Melissa and Teresa. You ladies were amazing, outstanding. Thanks so much. Have a good Sunday, everyone.
Thanks for having us, Alex. Bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.